Welcome to I Read This Book with Chris. With me, Chris. Today we are drinking an aviation, and this is the part where I should tell you the book that I'm discussing. I've read this book, but I'm not going to be discussing this book. I'm actually going to have a little rant. I'm going to call the rant "Live in the Real World, Read a Real Book." A rant. Completely off the cuff with Chris. Alrighty. Checking my notes for my off-the-cuff rant. When I picked it up, it looks just like any other old science fiction. It's called Galaxies by Barry N. Malzberg. Ever heard of this guy before? I thought this was just another old science fiction novel. And then I go and I read it, and this is the opening sentence. To define terms at the outset, this will not be a novel so much as a series of notes towards one. Nevertheless, pay attention, for it will cease to become a novel at exactly the point where it seems to be at last gathering force. Up until that time, which I will never tell, will be as much of a novel as The Rammers of Arctis or The Slinking Slowly on the Slime Planet Sludge, titles which flank this to the left and right, with covers offering inducements, let me be honest about this, they will never fulfill. This book, like it says there, is not a novel. It is a friend who is either very excited or is a little drunk, or probably a little both, telling you what his novel is about. And it starts off with that, and it moves up, and there's a bunch of chapters. Every chapter is like a page, page and a half, 2 pages, something like that. And it works its way up. It starts telling you about the novel, and the further you get, it becomes more and more of a novel. Or by the end, you have chapters which are basically full chapters, where it'll have dialogue, and then it'll say, and this will be the point where I add a description about this, that, or the other. Or, I need to do something here that'll really capture your heart. Or yada, yada, yada. That sort of stuff. And then, as he promises, and the point that disappointed me was the ending. Because it started off talking about a novel, and it started to turn into a novel. And just as you thought it was going to be something, and it just turned to nothing again. So that's what this rant is about. It's about how many people in our world do not want the real thing. They don't want to live in the real world. They want to in the potential. I don't know. I'm going to just explain to you what I mean by this. If we were talking about a book, potential is, here's an idea about a book. And you can think of it as a spectrum. Your potential over here, my idea about the book. And then you go, think about it, and it becomes a little bit more of something. A little bit more real. And then you go and you write a first draft. Becomes something even more. And then, as you work your way through the process of writing a book, and you bring it to an editor, and an editor knows all about books and how books should be. They go, and they help you turn from the first draft, or the rough idea of it, into something where eventually you'll end up with a real, actual book. So you go from potential to real. A lot of people in our day and age don't want to live in the real. They want to live in the potential. This may be postmodern crap. I don't know exactly where it all comes from. It may be the fact people want to live in the digital age, and people like video games and stuff like that, where there are video games now of mowing lawns, where you can make a business in a video game where you mow lawns. You could go out in the real world, mow lawns, and make a real business of it, and you'd actually have something. Or you can have the idea of it. But people don't want the real, they want the potential. With my terms sort of defined, let's go and talk about art. What I think art is, and what art should be. This is not everything that art is. But one of the aspects of art should be turning the potential to the real. So, science fiction is taking the potential, the concepts, the strange, weird ideas people have about what the future is or could be. And you're moving it down from the potential, moving it over to the real. It's never going to be real in the same way that me and you sitting in this room here are going to be real. But it's more real than it was. Or you could think about a sculpture. A sculpture hidden in that block of marble, right? As the old saying goes. And it's your job to go there and to chisel it out. You have a potential The block of marble could be turned into anything, but you go and you turn it into the thinking man or some other statue. You go and you taking it and you're turning it into something. And even other things that we call an art that may or may not be an art. Trying to find the real in stuff. Something that comes to mind is the art of history. If you are a historian, is it an art? Is it a science? Where is it on this whole spectrum of things? How do you do it? Some people have called it an art. You have a bunch of points, of facts about things in the world, and then you go and you look at all of them, and you gather the facts in order to tell a story. This is what happened. This is how Napoleon got his start. This is why Napoleon got his start. And there are a lot of facts, and you have to pick out which ones are there. In a similar way a sculptor might, where it's the art of removal. Or the opposite way, building up instead of taking down, like a potter who has a thing of clay and they have to build up, keep adding bits of clay to it. Or an author who takes a blank page and they add words. Both of these either taking away or adding up. You have something that has potential and you're building it into something, this thing that is art. And not all art is going to be something you can hold and is tangible, like a painting or a sculpture. Like performance is art. If you play a piece of music or you dance, it is real. You're physically there, you're doing something. And it's temporal, it's only there for a second. You can only watch it while they're up there. And the moment they're done dancing, the art's gone. But it was real. And if you go and if you take a recording, you take out your camera and you record a person dancing, now it's something you can hold on to. But it's also one step away from the real, more towards the side of potential. This real, actual thing, this real world we live in, is people doing things, people making art, people dancing. This is the real, and a lot of people don't want to live here. And I was really hoping this book, I shouldn't have hoped, because it tells you right in the beginning what's going to happen, is it's going to turn into a novel, and right when you're expecting it to be something, it's not. And maybe the fact that it did do exactly what it said and still disappointed me, maybe that should be something I'm looking to. But it's a deconstruction. It's like, here's a novel, but it's not fully a novel. Here's the idea of a novel. Part of my issue with people wanting to reject the real, what's there in front of their face, and they want to live more in the potential, is because the potential is always going to be better than the real. This is the road trip we're going to go on. This is our vacation. You can go and you can think about it. All sorts of things. And there's never any issues. It's always perfect. This is the story I'm going to write. The book, novel I'm going to write. In your head, it's perfect. Because it's not real. It's got potential. A lot of people in the real world want to live in a utopia, have these issues. Oh, here's the issue with our healthcare system. But there's not a healthcare system that would be good. They all are real, therefore, because they are real, and they have to actually exist in the real, actual world, they will do things and be limited by things, where maybe it's a limit of funding, or a limit of doctors, or a limit of something or the other, making it so that it's never going to be as good as your utopia. Because it's not utopia. Utopia is potential. But we live in the real world. And we live in a world that is so good. This might be someone else's utopia from a few hundred years ago. You live here, and you ignore the good stuff, and you focus on the negative. A lot of people do. And they want to just fix all these issues that they're having. These problems are real problems. But in order to fix them, you have to then go into this strange world that doesn't exist. Now, it may seem strange, me, a guy here, talking about books. Most of what I read and discuss on this channel is science fiction. When it comes to a book, is real, is art, is true. What exactly do I mean by this? Science fiction isn't art. Science fiction is real. Because it takes what might have been, what could be, and it moves it from potential towards reality. Brings it, it actualizes it, makes it into something. I love the physical book. This book was published in 1975. This book is more real. This science fiction book is more real than any ebook you can get about history. One, because it's real, because it's turning something that's so far into the strange world of potential, of concepts, of ideas, and it's bringing it. And it's not as far, I wouldn't say it's as far as a novel, in the real, but maybe it's just different. This book is more real than any ebook about history you could get. And that's because it's physical. It's here. This book was published in 1975, meaning 21 years before I was born. Before that, Barry had the idea for this novel, for this book. He went, maybe it took him a few months, maybe it took him a year, probably a few months. He had an idea for it. He made it, wrote it out, gave it to the editor. They worked their way through it. They created this. And then this came out 20 years before I was born. 21 years. So when this book is legally old enough to drink, I was born. Someone held this, one person, maybe multiple people, for those 21 years before I existed. And then when I was born, and then for another 28 years, one person or a big line of people went this actual physical object with its green pages, kept it in pretty good shape. It's got beat up around the edges. 49 years. It's set in stone. It's right here. That's something you can never take away from a real book. It's there. It exists. Ebook exists on a computer. The computer's real, but the stuff on the computer is a step away. A step outside of the real. It's not set in stone. There have been controversies about updates to movies. The amount of people upset about Star Wars getting updated and they weren't able to access the real one anymore, the original. Or if you come to books, how come a signed book is worth more than a book that's not signed? Why is a first edition worth more than later editions? A signed book means the person who wrote it, who created it out of thin air, actually had something to do with the physical copy. And people seem to think that's worth something. Or first editions, if you're printing the 40th printing of a book, a James Patterson novel, you know you're just printing money. You did 39 printings before, they keep selling. Oh, let's do another one. Someone took a bet, real money, to create this. They had no idea. They had a little bit of a track record, but this specific book hadn't sold. If it's the first edition, ebooks can never have that. Ebooks can never smell like an old book. They never have dog-eared pages, sun bleaching on the cover. Ebooks can't be signed. You know the author never touched it. It's not as real. Let's live in the real world. Read a real book.